Hello and welcome to my review of the Tyranid Exocrine, or Horospex, whichever one you choose it to be, but I've built the Exocrine. This model will cost you £44. It is a fair amount of money considering you don't get many plastic parts. It's the same price as the Exocrine and Malaceptor. They're both the same kind of kit, and it's very similar to that kit too. I think it actually came out about the same time. We'll have a look at the model. It was very easy to put together. If you're new to Tyranids, you're just starting out and you want to know how easy this one is to build, very easy. An afternoon, if most. It won't take you very long. You've got a main carapace section that's in a half. You've got a body section that's in a half. The gun and the head are. The arms are in two pieces each. The legs are, and the tail is. It's kind of a twin kit in a way. Most of these parts, with the exception of the two arms at the front, are in pairs, and you just glue them together and then glue them onto the model. Fair bit of detail going on. It's got a short tail. It's not as curly as the Exocrine. The Exocrine one has a bit of a curve to it, but it's a very similar vein. You've got this frontal carapace section with a load of spore chimneys, and you've also got this tail carapace with the main body with a couple of legs and basically four arms on the front. So it's very similar. The first thing you're probably going to notice about the model is this big weapon that's jutting out of its body. That weapon is actually the Exocrine itself, and the little Tyranid sort of underneath is its kind of slave to it. The main Tyranid in this model is that gun, and it's called a bioplasmic cannon. I'll talk about the rules later on, but it's this big old cannon that can fire sort of artillery-wise over the battlefield and annihilate sort of troop positions. So yeah, fair bit of detail, what you're used to in the past sort of 3 or 4 years from Tyranids. I think it's a great looking model. I'm not sure whether they had one a long time ago, but maybe I'm getting it confused with a pyrovore or whatever they're called. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll just show you the like little instruction booklet that you get. It's fine. Normally I have some complaints, like I had some complaints with the Tyrannocyte one. I didn't think that the tendrils and tentacles and things were well displayed in terms of positioning, but this black and white one is fine. It's got so few parts, and when you do construct it, it's not fiddly at all. I can't obviously say much about the Horospex. From what I can see now, it is a little bit trickier, but it is well laid out in this instruction manual. And normally I will say definitely the instruction book needs updating and things, but actually this is quite passable, other than like the little painting tip guide that you get with them now and an updated 8th edition rule set. So as I keep mentioning, you can build a Horospex which looks something like that. It's kind of stuff of nightmares with this big gaping mouth and shoveling claws and things. So they're your two options in this one kit. These are all of the spare parts for the Horospex, just here. So yeah, you get a fair few parts. They're mainly just the double pairing for the, shoveling claws, which are pretty big kind of crab-like claws, well, without another pincer, and the double half of this big sort of gaping maw thing that sort of comes out of its mouth, along with this big kind of tongue with this hook and claw on it, and the Horospex's head. So maybe you could use a couple of these spare parts on bases, like the head. Magnetizing wise, I think it would be possible to magnetize this head and this gun. Just take that out and put the head and this gaping maw in for the Horospex, and the same for the shoveling claws, because the body and the sort of forearm legs and the actual back legs, they are exactly the same. You could magnetize the tail, or you could just put the little kind of spiky bit on the tail and just call it that, save you sort of taking that off and on when you changing the front of it. So it is possible with a bit of magnetization, but I wanted mine static. And I probably will get a Horospex at some point for the High Fleet. Okay, now for some size comparison. So I'll put some Tyranid creatures there. So there's a Gene Stealer and a Tyranid Warrior. It's pretty much a similar size to the Exocrine, which I'll show you right here. So here is the Exocrine. They're the same price too. Obviously the Exocrine has these huge toxic lashes, so it takes up a much more area on the battlefield. And with the Exocrine, it's great because you can just hide quite a few of these about and then not interfere with your other models like the Exocrine would. So it's a very similar creature, except for it's just got this big bioplasmic cannon. Compared to a Tyranid, I think it's sort of, I want to say smaller, but that gun is, you know, that gun could be a bit longer, but there you go. It's definitely smaller sort of height-wise than the Tyranid, but they've all got the same bases, but the Tyranid is a fair bit cheaper than these two, you know, £44 models. So I hope that helps. I'll just compare him to a couple of Imperial models. So here is a Space Marine. So Space Marine fits kind of fully underneath, you know, the chin of the Exocrine there. And then the Primaris, of course, probably, yeah, not even at head height. Don't know if that helps there. But yeah, it's barely at sort of head height on the Exocrine. So I'll probably classify it as a medium/large Tyranid model. And now in this part of my review, I'll just talk to you about all of the rules. So you'll find the Exocrine in your brand new Tyranid Codex under heavy support. It is a contested section in the book. You've got everything from Toxocrines, which I've just shown you, to Tyrannifexes, Biovores, Carnifexes, you know, all those different types like the Screamer Killers and things like that, and the Thornbacks, and of course the Morlocks and the Trigons. So it's a hotly contested section in the Tyranid force, like it is in a lot of armies actually, especially like the Space Marine Army too. So the Exocrine will cost you 11 power points, or in match play, the Exocrine is 216 points, with the bioplasmic cannon coming in at 0, which is a fair bit. I mean, you can get a Dimacheron for that, you can get the Horospex for that. It is costly, just for that one weapon, pretty much, but it's still cheaper than the Tyrannifex that I showed you. So its stat line, unfortunately, the model's characteristics do change as it suffers damage. If it's got between 7 and 12 wounds, the weapon skill is 4+, ballistic skill 4+, and attacks 3. 4 to 6 wounds, the weapon skill remains at 4+, but ballistic skill drops to 5+, and attacks D3. And then when it's on its final 3 wounds, the weapon skill drops to 5+, ballistic skill is 5+, and then it only has 1 attack. So as soon as it loses half of its wounds, you know, you're going to have to be hitting on 5+. Not too bad, because it gets a lot of shots, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So its movement is 6 inches, and I said before, its weapon skill is 4+, ballistic skill 4+, strength is 7, toughness is 8, 12 wounds, has 3 attacks, leadership 6, and a save of 3+. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an invulnerable save, which sucks. It does have a high toughness, same toughness as that Tyrannifex, and it does have a fair few wounds with 12. And save of 3+ is pretty good, so with the high toughness and the great save, it is quite survivable. It has a bioplasmic cannon, so this is a big gun on it. Personally, I think it should be range 48, even if it drops by a couple of shots. So its range is 36 inches, it's got heavy 6 shots, strength 7, AP -3, and damage 2. Doesn't have any abilities. Powerful limbs is just the strength of the user, which is 7, AP -1, and damage 2. It has instinctive behaviour, so you're going to have something close by, because it does have a poor leadership. It has symbiotic targeting. If the model does not move in its movement phase, you can add 1 to its hit rolls in the following shooting phase. If you do so, it cannot charge in the same turn. So that's great. It's even more of a reason for it to just stay where it is, because then you've got ballistic skill 3+, which I think it should be anyway for a, you know, artillery ballistic focused unit. Weapon Beast. If the model does not move in your movement phase, you can shoot all of its weapons twice in your shooting phase. So it's the same ability as what the Tyrannifex has. If it doesn't move, you're going to get heavy 12 shots of strength 7, AP -3, damage 2, which is pretty decent against, you know, Space Marine equivalent models. Death throws. If the model is reduced to 0 wounds, you roll a dice before removing the model from the battlefield, and on a 6, it lashes out in its death throws, and each unit within 3 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds. So it's exactly the same as the death throws for the Tyrannifex too, but obviously it's going to get there quicker, you know, because it's got the less wounds. And that's pretty much it. It doesn't have any other abilities other than those. It just has that Weapon Beast and the symbiotic targeting. Symbiotic targeting is pretty good. You know, it encourages you to really have this model stay still and fire. Although obviously you're going to need line of sight. It is an artillery looking creature. I would have liked some kind of ability. I mean, the Dimachieran's got that ability where it's kind of adapted to leap over buildings and structures and things. It would have been nice if this had the ability similar to like a Whirlwind or Typhon or something like that, where it doesn't need line of sight. But maybe if it's near a model that has synapse, it's integrated into the hive mind and it either boosts its ballistic skill, or it can fire at units that it can't see, or fire at units that the synapse creature can see. A bit like the gargoyles, I'm always looking for extra abilities or rules that I think Games Workshop could implement that really fleshes out these Tyranids or Xenos in general, to explain that they are highly evolved and suited to wiping out the sort of food of the galaxy, if you will. It's not the best unit, you know, because it does need that line of sight, and it's only the 36-inch range, so you are going to be limited. If someone wants to target you with, you know, 5 las cannons or something, they're going to, you know, really give it a bad day. Likewise, I don't really see much point you having one of those if you have a Tyrannofex, because a Tyrannofex can move and shoot and it doesn't suffer any penalties. But again, if it doesn't move, it's going to be shooting that rupture cannon twice, so you're getting 6 shots. Yes, 6 shots, you know, is half of the 12 that the Exocrine can pump out, but it is at a third more range at the 48 inches, and it is strength 10 with a damage of, well, possibly 6 because it's D6, and more survivable with those 2 extra wounds. But there you go. The Tyrannofex does cost more. It doesn't cost any more power points, which is interesting, but it does cost more points in sort of match play. So in summary, I think it's a great little unit. Probably not the best on the battlefield because it doesn't have many abilities that set it apart, but I suppose if you had a synapse creature nearby, like a Neurothrope or a Malanthrope that did the synapse and reduced incoming shots at them, and you had 2 of them, you know, if they don't move, that's 12 shots, you know, which is pretty horrific. You just got to make sure that you're in range, because if you're not, it's going to be a pain moving them and not being able to fire those 6 shots. So it's a very sort of static unit, which I don't think suits Tyranids that well. Firing has never been a strong point. I think I've always thought that Tyranids are best in swarms and up close and personal, and surprise attacks out of nowhere. So if you're having to move this to get it into position to fire, something's gone wrong, and before you know it, it's going to take a lot of fire and be taken down. And that's all I really wanted to say about the Exocrine. What do you guys think? Do you use it in your games? Which battles has it performed the best in, and against what army? And what do you think of the model? Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. For the Norn Queen.